Let's be real. Early retirement isn't built for people like us. We're working twice as hard, navigating racism at work, taking care of our families, and still trying to catch up to the wealth we were never given. So, how did I retire at 51? I'll tell you, but it starts with unlearning the lies. Hey, I'm Sabado. I'm a former HR executive, African American, and early retiree. I'm not a financial guru. I'm just someone who got tired of surviving and finally chose freedom. This video is for every black professional who's exhausted, burned out, and wondering if they'll ever get off the hamster wheel. And I'll even venture to say this extends even to any people of color or women, because a lot of us find ourselves in that same situation. So let's talk about how I broke free when the odds were stacked against me. I spent 20 years in corporate America. I earned a title, I made a salary, I played the game. But that all comes with a cost, especially for us. Microaggressions, pressure to perform, being the only one in the room, and then you add to that debt and just general family obligations, and you start to realize that this version of success is exhausting, and often it's unsustainable. For me, the turning point came during my last job. I was in a meeting and I looked around the room and I saw other executives undermining each other, backbiting, and just faking the funk. And on top of that, I had gone to my boss and I asked my boss very clearly, hey, look, I realize that I'm the lowest paid executive in the room, and I believe that my salary demands a higher market value. And his conversation to me was, well, go and do the analysis. And so I did the same analysis for myself that I would do for anybody else, and realized that I was about 60% below what the market would bear. And the only reason I had taken a lower salary was because it was a nonprofit organization. And I figured at a nonprofit organization, they weren't going to be able to pay what the rest of the market paid. But that was false, because everybody else was doing it except for me. And so in his conversation to me, he says, okay, we'll go ahead and take a look at your salary, do the analysis, and I'll continue to do analysis. So a week came, a month came, and then 2 or 3 months passed. And I realized this person really doesn't value me in this organization. You know, he may talk the game, they may say they valued human resources, but at the end of the day, human resources in that organization was just running in the hamster wheel, doing a bunch of tactical things, and were not part of the business. And being a business professional with a functional area of expertise, that just wasn't going to work for me. And it was at that point that I realized I wasn't living, I was just surviving. And then one night I asked myself, what would it take for me to walk away from all of this? And not run, not to quit, but to retire early on my own terms. And that is when everything changed. I stopped chasing status. I started chasing peace. My peace, I realized, was way more important than any status. I was the chief human resources officer. I was the highest I could go in my profession. But I got tired of that. And so I said, my peace is more important than that. And I changed my focus. And here's what I started to focus on. I started to focus on living with less, living on less money, paying off debt, and saving aggressively. And I focused on staying focused even when others thought I was crazy. When I started to talk to people about the idea or the prospect of retiring early, there were a bunch of naysayers. There were a lot of people that told me why I couldn't do it. And I had to explain to them, I wasn't trying to get rich. I was just trying to buy my freedom back. And slowly, my monthly needs shrank, my savings grew, and I saw something I never thought I would, that many of you, I think, are looking for, and that's a way out. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Early retirement content is rarely made with us in mind. And again, I talk about us. I was a black executive, and I'm still black. I'm just not an executive anymore. But again, we look at women, we look at people of color. The retirement channels and the retirement content rarely is made for us. And, it doesn't always feel like the rules apply. In fact, the rules feel like they don't apply. But here's the truth. You don't have to be rich to retire early. You have to be strategic. You have to be clear on what matters. And yes, sometimes you have to be, the first in your circle to kind of do it. If I were looking for role models to retire early, then I may have never done it because I couldn't go to YouTube because I don't see a lot of black retirees on YouTube. I couldn't look at my personal circles because I didn't have a bunch of people in my personal circles that retired early. I couldn't go to my family because I don't have people in my family that retired early. And so I had to be the trailblazer. I had to do it. And then a lot of those folks that I just mentioned, they had different opinions about it. But just because all of those factors played, it didn't mean that it wasn't for me. Or, it didn't mean that just because nobody else did it, I couldn't do it. I did it in spite of all of that. These days, I wake up when I want. I travel more. I work out more. In fact, I worked out this morning before I went and volunteered for a Master Gardener program. I'm creating and not reacting. And most importantly, I'm healing. I was sitting with a good friend of mine today, and like many of you, I feel like I have to put on a tough facade. I think being a man, and I was having this conversation with another buddy of mine the other day. I think as a man, I never felt like, and I was never socialized to express my feelings. And one of the areas that I started to really focus on was expressing my feelings because I think feelings matter. And going to work every day, dealing with all the bullshit at work, I always kept that inside. I never felt like I could express that. I didn't talk about how it made me feel because I felt like somehow it made me feel weak. And it wasn't until I retired that I started to understand that the feelings that I have, those are valid feelings. It doesn't mean that I'm weak. It doesn't mean that I'm soft. It doesn't mean that I'm not as tough as the next person and can't deal with adversity. But what it means is that I'm human. And it wasn't until I retired that I had the capacity to really understand that and understand the impact that some of my previous jobs have had on me as a human being and who I am and who I've become over time. And so part of the biggest thing that's happened to me during my early retirement is it gave me the opportunity to heal. And it's not until you get out of that environment and you build that capacity to really think about your life in a different way that you start to identify some of those things. And I was healing from burnout. I was healing from work trauma. I was healing from the constant pressure to prove myself. Because when anybody else would do something, it was great. But when I said something, I always had to prove that it was true. It's just one of those things. It's like I always say about Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods couldn't just come out and be a golfer and be given credit for being a golfer. He had to come out and kick everybody's ass, which is exactly what he did, which is why when I say Tiger Woods, even if you don't like golf, you know who I'm talking about because there's a whole bunch of other golfers that nobody knows their name, but Tiger, they know his name. So that's the message that I want, to leave with you today is the healing becomes possible when you're out of the environment. Freedom is possible even when the system is unfair. The system is stacked against us, but freedom is still possible. The reason that I have this channel and the reason I talk to you every single week isn't because I'm telling you to get rich. It's not because I think everybody's in this great set of circumstances. And quite frankly, I don't think everybody's going to be able to retire early. But what I do want you to do is I want you to understand that there is a way to find freedom in a system that's set up for you to fail. You just have to define it for yourself and take one step closer every day. Figure out where it is that you want to get to and take one single step. If you're saving $1 a day, save $1.25. If you want to find a new job, then start putting out resumes in your current job. Whatever it is, if you want to improve something, take one step every single day because you'll be surprised at how much you can do in a short period of time when you're not putting the pressure on yourself to do the big thing all at one time. So if this resonated with you, subscribe. This channel is about real stories, real numbers, and real freedom. I tell you my story in hopes that it inspires you to do the things that you want to do. I always say, and I believe it to be true, is that I don't expect everybody to retire early, but I do expect you to live your best life. So I'm Sabado. I'm the everyday retiree. I'm just like one of you, just another black man caught up in the mix. I'm not even trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. I'm trying to make $1 out of a nickel. I'm still working my way to 15 cents. But thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.